Hi, I'm Wes Clark Jr. and welcome to TYT Interviews. Today we're going to be joined by Tom Risen, a technology and business reporter who's got a varied background with a lot of publications and who has written extensively on pollution, water, and desecration of Native American lands. Tom, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Good. But yes, there's this major protest movement against the Dakota Access Pipeline that tomorrow there's going to be more than 100 events in about 35 states, including here in D.C. There's going to be one right in front of the White House where Bernie Sanders is expected to make an appearance. And tribes like the Standing Rock Sioux have been protesting it for months because they say it would endanger their main supply of drinking water and it would desecrate sacred burial ground sites near their reservation.
To go into the details of it, and we'll get back to the protests and everything else, can we go around the background a little bit of why Native American tribes might not trust the federal government or rulings in terms of how to take care of their own land?
Yes, well, the Standing Rock Sioux said that they weren't properly consulted in the planning of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and so they've sued the Army Corps of Engineers. A judge last Friday ruled against them, their injunction seeking to stop the construction of the pipeline. But the Obama administration did step in and say they wanted to stop part of the construction that would go underneath the Missouri River, a lake near the river that would endanger their water supply. So they're going to review that part of it. But they had this legacy of distrust against the government because these reservations, like the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, used to be a lot larger. And over the decades, the Army Corps of Engineers and other government agencies took land from the tribal governments. And so their reservation lands have been reduced. They're worried that they're not getting enough support that they need from the government for things like poverty and water cleanliness. So this has been a big focal point for all these decades of resentment against the government.
A couple points just off what you've said. Are the goals of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe that there's no pipeline access across the reservation or simply underneath this one lake?
They want to stop the construction of the pipeline near their reservation. It wouldn't go through the reservation. It would go within a mile of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, and it would, as proposed, go underneath a lake that feeds into the Missouri River, which is their main source of drinking water. They use it for livestock, for agriculture, for drinking water, and they also say that it would desecrate sacred burial ground sites.
You know, my next question is, how can the Army Corps of Engineers violate treaties that we already have with indigenous nations and simply take back land from the reservation that was given to them in treaty?
This happened back in the 1950s, and they built dams from the Missouri River over land that was once part of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. I think that I'm not entirely sure how they seized the land, but the Standing Rock Sioux has said in their criticism that this was land that was once theirs, and there wasn't proper consultation with the tribal government about how this pipeline was going to be built.
And to go back, and so essentially the Standing Rock Sioux are saying, listen, this pipeline, even if it doesn't cross our land, it's endangering our water, and that's reason enough to stop it.
Yes. A lot of environmental protesters are worried about that too.
And now, but let's also look at the record of the federal government and the EPA with other Indian tribes and their water and the safety of their drinking water. How is that?
Well, the Navajo have had a particularly bad history with that. In the early 20th century, mining companies went on Southwest reservation lands and they dug for uranium. And the companies did not do a very good job of cleaning up the uranium mines, so the radiation seeped into the groundwater and contaminated generations of people. There is a disease named after the victims called Navajo neuropathy, and some people die of it in their teenage years because it's a radiation sickness. It can really, it causes all kinds of sickness. And so recently, when there was a mining spill that the EPA was deemed responsible for, failing to prevent, the Navajo were suspicious about that, and so the Navajo Nation has sued the EPA because they claim that the emergency response to the mining spill wasn't enough.
Now, this mining spill was this the one last spring in Colorado where the river turned yellow?
It was last August. It was
Last August.
yes,
Okay.
it was. The Colorado River was poisoned by the Gold King mine spill. It turned the river yellow with toxic chemicals. And state governments in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona have all criticized and sought to be made whole from the EPA about this because the government review deemed that the EPA was responsible. And the EPA has been doing something to compensate state governments, to compensate the tribal governments, but the Navajo Nation says that it isn't enough.
Now, among other tribal nations in the U.S., are they also suffering from these same infrastructure problems when it comes to clean water and the safety of their environment?
Yes, yes. There's been a lot of neglect over the decades. It's gotten better since the 1970s. Native Americans have gotten better at asserting their rights, at holding companies accountable, getting more aid from the government. But like I spoke with a woman who lives in the Alaskan village of Kivalina, and she said she doesn't have a toilet. She lives in this Alaskan village where almost nobody has clean water, and she has to bag up her waste and drive it to a landfill because she does not have a toilet. And people who live there have a high rate of sickness. There are bad colds and flus, and there's all sorts of problems. That's an extreme example, but there are a wide range of clean water and sanitation challenges on the reservations.
Well, Alaska aside, I used to put up wind turbines, and I almost did a contract for a village that was in the Arctic Circle. So I'm pretty familiar with how bare bones people have got it up there, and a lot of it's a question of power, electrical generation, and infrastructure, and can it run these systems? But down here in the lower 48, I mean, when you go to a lot of reservations in New Mexico or Colorado or the Dakotas, these people are not taken care of, and the U.S. is not fulfilling its treaty obligations to a large extent with these tribes.
Yeah, I spoke with the EPA about this. It's becoming more nuanced because a few decades ago, absolutely, it would be easy to say that there wasn't enough aid. In recent years, there has been more. The tribal governments say that they need more help. They say that the government needs to do more. It would be simplistic to say that things would be better if there was more funding to assist them, but it's becoming more nuanced because it's about the effectiveness of the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. It's about the help on the ground, and more money would help, but it's getting to that point where we have to look at just what is the right way to help the tribal governments.
Yeah, because in the article I read that you'd written that the U.S. government had pledged $100 million. And this is just about the Navajo, to deal with the problem of the Navajo. But, I think you said there were 1,238 families that $100 million is supposed to cover, as well as clean up and take care of people. And I've been in the emergency room, and I can tell you, not getting cancer or radiation poisoning, just a standard operation is going to run $80,000, $90,000 for a person. And if you take 1,238 families and that $100 million, you've sucked down that money before you've built anything.
Yeah, and the EPA has been seeking more money for clean water programs, and it's all about how effective would this money be. You have to spread it across a lot of people who are affected by these problems, like the radiation poisoning.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see these pipeline protests ending? Because I think more is happening than just this particular pipeline, at least in people's minds, as to what needs to go on.
Yeah, like the environmental protesters' success against the Keystone Pipeline last year really emboldened them. So that's one reason there's been so much advocacy against this. It's just something people understand. Even the cast of the upcoming Justice League movie has come out against the Dakota Access Pipeline. This is something that people understand, and because the Keystone Pipeline was such an issue for so long, and it kind of resembles it because the Keystone Pipeline would have run through some northern states, and the Dakota Access Pipeline would also run through some northern states. It would go to North Dakota oil fields instead of up to Canada. But this is, part of the pipeline has already been built in the southern states. The Energy Transfer Partners has already built part of the pipeline. But I think the biggest issue that, people also realize that the cultural risk to the tribes is something that can be understood. When there's an issue like this, you need something that people can understand and wrap their head around when it comes to policy. I think that the Obama administration stepped in and said the federal judge said the pipeline construction can continue, but the Obama administration said, hold on, let's take a look at this part of the pipeline that's close to the reservation. We'll take a closer look. And a major part of the announcement was that they say the tribes need to be included more when there's development near their reservations. That could affect their drinking water. That could affect their tribal governments. So the Obama administration wants to make sure that the tribal governments are more involved. That is one of the major things that could come out of this controversy.
Has anybody brought up that it's kind of amazing that a group of impoverished people who have been pushed to the margins of American society are the only people to really stand up and stop pipeline companies? 'Cause I remember my family's from Arkansas, and I remember there was a big pipeline problem down there last year, and a lot of people have oil in their yards and under their yards and everything else because it broke. I mean, what's wrong with the rest of the country that they somehow think it's okay to put our drinking water in jeopardy?
Well, it's interesting. The Dakota Access Pipeline was originally going to be built near Bismarck, North Dakota, which is the state capital. But officials were worried that it could contaminate the water supply. So they moved it near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, where it could contaminate the water supply. And that apparently worried them less. So you have to remember, there are only 5 million registered, just 5.4 million registered Native Americans on the US Census. That is 2% of the US population. They have a very hard time asserting themselves. They have a very hard time getting attention for their issues, which is one reason I decided to do this in-depth reporting, because journalists are supposed to find a story that isn't getting enough news coverage. So that's their biggest challenge. And since the 70s, they've gotten better at it. They've gotten a lot more legal advocacy. They've been better at influencing politics. But this is, they're the smallest demographic in the country.
And it matches, something I see all the time, which is pollution is outsourced to people who are powerless and poor in their communities, in their neighborhoods throughout the United States.
Yeah, they have. A lot of mining companies have been held accountable in recent decades for things that happened in the early 20th century, like with the uranium problem. Some of those companies were held accountable by the EPA, and the EPA is still doing more to address that. There's still, the tribes are still pressing for more compensation because they said, okay, you recognize that these companies were responsible, but look at all of the legacy of the problems that they were responsible for. We need more help, and that's continuing.
So what are the milestones that we're going to be looking for in the coming days and weeks in the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, and where do you think it can go? Because personally, for me, when I watch it, I think, are we seeing the beginnings finally of a real movement to protect our environment, our water, and our air in this country?
Yeah, well, one thing that could happen is there's a protest planned in front of the White House tomorrow. And President Obama has not made a direct comment about this. Somebody asked him about the pipeline, and he said he wasn't able to answer it because he needed to learn more about it. So that's one thing that could happen. President Obama could make a comment about it. And Bernie Sanders may, like I said, he may make an appearance tomorrow in front of the White House at this protest. So it's becoming a national issue. Celebrities are getting involved, politicians are getting involved. And I think, the Obama administration has said that they're going to invite tribal governments this fall to be more involved in reviews of development projects. That's a big thing that could happen if the tribal governments have, because of all this advocacy on the national level, if they have more of a say in development that affects their reservations, that could be a big outcome.
It's hard. I've worked, because I used to work in the wind power business, I had contact with some people from the Sioux and Lakota tribes, and the idea was that they're like, we have enough land and wind that you could power most of the United States from here, and they had big plans to take young people and recreate war parties, but instead of a war party, it's a maintenance party, and they go out and service everything. The problem is, it's getting the capital. It's getting the capital out of banks, out of support from the government, out of credits, in order to get this stuff built. And right now, they don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah, like I said, it's simplistic to say that more money would fix everything. It wouldn't. You need, to use the money wisely.
Yeah.
And you need the will of the tribal governments also, because there's a big existential thunk. Being a Native American, you are the smallest demographic in the country. You have a lot of there's generations of resentment and guilt and bitterness. And they can, the tribal governments need to inspire people. Like I like the example of the war parties because they can. There's a really, really good novel that I like called Ceremony. It's about a war veteran who comes home from World War II, and he's a Pima Indian, and it's about using your heritage to help you build a better future. Just accept where you're at, and say, okay, I come from this great heritage. I'm going to use it to build a better future, and that's what the tribal governments can do. But to do that, more money would definitely help.
Mm-hmm. No, in complete agreement. I mean, looking at our record of how we've treated Native American tribes, especially that horrible time period between the 1890s and the early 1970s, where it was forced assimilation and just general disrespect. It's nice to see tribes coming back now. Now, do you have some more to add on Dakota Pipeline, or can we transition real quick into something else that you've got some expertise in?
Yeah. Keep an eye on the protests tomorrow. There's going to be protests in 35 states, and including in front of the White House. See what happens.
How could people get involved with these protests if they think this is a big issue to stop?
Well, there's an internet movement is happening. There's one of the main hashtags is no DAPL, no Dakota Access Pipeline, and you can find a lot of people tweeting about that. Celebrities, politicians, people have been posting articles about it. That's one main way to get involved.
Okay, great. Now let's talk a little bit about something totally unrelated, cybersecurity that you've worked on pretty extensively.
Yes, technology is my main focus, but this is a big story, so yes, technology.
Okay, on this technology piece, how open to attack and vulnerable is the United States to cyber warfare?
I think everybody is. I think that people need to realize that this, all these gadgets we use, like computers and phones, and everything is becoming digitized. So everything is available on the cloud somewhere increasingly, and the Internet of Things is going to make that even more of a problem. Companies are recognizing this, especially the financial sector. I think that your bank account and your online banking is probably the safest digital account you have. They've been taking it very seriously, but a lot of companies have not. And there's a lot of reporting out there about how unprepared companies are. They haven't been taking the steps at the executive level to say, okay, I'm in the boardroom and I'm going to talk about this cybersecurity problem. They really haven't been doing that as much outside of the financial sector.
But even in the financial sector, I've got some friends that used to be Secret Service agents that worked in financial crimes, and a couple that are VPs for cybersecurity for large banks. And confidentially, they've told me that the amount of money being stolen from the U.S. banking system is on par with the illicit drug market in terms of the size and volume of cash being taken out.
I believe it. It's easy. It's easy money to take money. For cybercrime is pretty easy. I hate using that term cybercrime because I think it dumbs down the conversation. I accept the word cybersecurity, but I think that we need to have an intelligent
cybercrime.
conversation.
You think of Macduff, the crime dog. I totally get it.
Don't attach cyber to everything, but yes, it is important that you recognize that it is easy to do that because you're not there when the money's being taken. You can do it from Russia or China, and you could do it, and it's very hard to track you. And if you do get tracked, then people in Russia or China will probably not be extradited. So there's this, feeling of invincibility among some hackers that this is a crime they can get away with.
And how specific is it to Russia and China in particular, and how deep have they been able to penetrate into U.S. systems?
Well, it's interesting. Russia and China have reportedly been good at recruiting criminal hackers from within their own countries. They find out that somebody's been hacking systems or they've been doing online theft, and they say, "Hi, I'm a secret agent, and I know what you've been doing, and I won't send you to prison if you do these favors for me once in a while." So that is how, when you hear about Russia and China's government being involved, that's how they're doing it. They have these proxies that they employ discreetly to do these data breaches for them. And there's a lot of that because people who do botnet attacks where they kind of patchwork attacks through networks in different countries, so they become harder to track.
Now, when looking at these attacks and the directions in the recruitment, don't we also do the same thing? Where if an American is caught hacking, that the government offers them a deal to work for them?
Oh, I'm sure that the government and the intelligence agencies definitely want people with those skills. They want people who know how to get secrets. But I've spoken with former spies, and including former CIA Director Michael Hayden, and he says that the USA practices a code of conduct with their hacking. Military hacking, totally okay. President Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping made a no hacking agreement a few months ago, and military hacking is not included in it. You know, it is accepted. This is something that nations do for national security. But the U.S., according to people like Michael Hayden, have said that the U.S. does not attack private companies. They consider them civilians in the online war. They don't hack private companies. They don't try to steal money. They don't try to steal information that is not related to national security. So that's how the U.S. differs.
So essentially the U.S. differs is once we've identified you and pulled you out, you're done robbing people.
I can't exactly talk about how the intelligence agencies do that. I mean, I'm sure they talk with those people because they want to know how to do it. I cannot prove it, but
well, I'm thinking about that.
Conduct.
I'm thinking about the case in Florida a couple years ago where they had I can't remember this guy's name. He was a hacker that they caught, that they brought in, that they forced him to be an informant, and then it wound up he was actually still hacking even though he was working for the Secret Service.
Oh, yeah, well, they've done that with hacktivists too. Yeah, like the hacktivists who are involved with these groups are given deals, like inform on people who are doing this, and we'll lower your sentence, and we'll give you some it'll count good against your record. Mm-hmm. So there's that for sure.
And our power systems, are these safe?
I think that they're more safe than people. Some people will talk all the time about cyber Pearl Harbor is a term that has been used many, many times. And there is a risk. There is a risk that the power grid could be hacked. But I think that a lot of the power grid you have to remember, this will be a bigger problem as time goes on, as more and more systems are connected to the internet, but not all of them are. A lot of them are still run on traditional systems like the power grid. It's a risk, but I think a lot of systems are still run on traditional non-connected systems. It's becoming more and more connected, but I think that if they build it with that in mind, that it could be compromised, then I think we'll be relatively safe.
So in the next couple of years, we're going to have implantable connected devices in our bodies. Would you do that?
No, I don't think I would. I don't even wear a Fitbit. I mean, I don't really need it. You have to think about the cost benefit of things like that. If you could implant something in your body that would tell you information that you absolutely need to make your daily life better, then that would be worth considering. Like, that's why wearables have not yet taken off as a huge consumer product. Like, the Apple Watch is the most advanced watch out there, but it's not their biggest selling product because people do not need it. Your smartphone already does a lot of the things that wearables do, if not more. So if it gets to the point where it is a thing that you need, then it will be a bigger issue. But it's not. It's still getting there.
Great. Is there anything you want to talk about a little more in depth?
Yeah, I think that the one important part that you mentioned about hacking was the DNC hacks. Mm-hmm. I think that Russia may be trying to tamper with the election a little bit. They may not be trying to influence. They may be trying to collect intelligence. They may be trying to discredit the United States. It's also, I spoke with people like former spies who have said that Russia has kind of a paranoid mentality. They feel that they need to steal information that might be publicly available. So, take that into consideration. When you see news about the DNC hacks and the release of the Clinton emails, it may be just that Russia is being paranoid and that they're just trying to get a rise out of the United States to make themselves look powerful. That's what Putin does. Putin is all about projecting power.
But I think confusing his opponents.
Yes, definitely. I think our voting system is pretty safe. It's a risk that they could influence the voting, but I think that it's mostly just the Russians trying to project power and collect intelligence about who could be the future president.
So you don't think it's a big threat for the fall election?
It's a threat. Definitely the FBI has said with they said there's a high degree of certainty that Russia's responsible for the DNC hacks. It's just, you like political news. I think that this is the biggest cybersecurity political news out there. How is Russia trying to influence the election? I think that it's not as big of a threat as it could be. I think that it's interesting that they are capable of doing this, that they're capable of going to the DNC, collecting their research database. And Arizona and Illinois have reportedly been targeted by Russian intelligence hackers also. But it would have to be an incredibly close election for them to influence the voting to turn the vote to one candidate or another, especially if to be undetected. It's very difficult for them to do something like that and not get noticed.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of a threat, I mean, it's obviously not as much of a threat as the Chinese stealing all the security clearance background checks from the CIA a year ago.
Yeah, well, it was the OPM. It was the
Officer Personnel.
It wasn't just. It was a lot of. I'm sure it was people connected with intelligence agencies, but it was just all the federal government, across the federal government, not just that. But yes, that was a bigger risk. I think that in this case, it's just Russia stirring up trouble. Russia trying to collect intelligence about who could be the future president, because the CIA does that too. The CIA collects information about politicians in other countries, but they don't need to steal it because a lot of it is publicly available, and Russia seems a bit paranoid. But I think that this is Russia projecting power and trying to just make the United States look silly on the international stage. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it could swing the election in a serious way. Especially, they would be detected doing that. They're just trying to stir up trouble.
Okay. Well, Tom, thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Hopefully, we'll get some more from you in the next month or two and see where these protests go about the pipeline and what happens with the election and hacking. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that's great. I had fun chatting with you. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. You've been watching TYT Interviews with Tom Risen. I'm host Wes Clark Jr., and thank you for joining us.